Hello, everybody. My name is Margaret, and I will be leading the Insight Outreach drop-in sessions today. This is your chance to ask any question, anything at all about any upcoming applications you're doing, any current anxieties you have about your exams. I hope they're all going really well. While I wait for you to feed me some questions, I will just tell you a bit about myself. I am from Glasgow. I now live in Berlin, where I moved here nearly 2 years ago to work as an opera singer. But I'm here to tell you a little bit about my story, which is that I studied Italian and French, so modern and medieval languages, it's called, at Cambridge between 2008 and 2012. But my school had never sent anybody to university in England before, never mind to Oxbridge. So basically, I decided that that's what I wanted to do and that's what I wanted to apply for. And then I just had to fight for help and fight my little corner. And I was really, really, really lucky. With my teachers. I had some incredibly supportive teachers who helped me through the whole process. Basically in Scotland, I don't know if any of you are from Scotland or know how it works in Scotland, but it is free in Scotland to study at university. So my school my Glasgow State School in any other sense was a good school in that it sent people to university. But just to give you an example, there were 80 in my year. So again, it's quite a small school, really. There were 80 in my year, of which 40 of us, more or less, went to university, of which 6 went to university outside of Glasgow, because Glasgow has 3 universities, and people could save money by staying at home and everything. And it's a fantastic city. So lots of people were like, why would you want to leave? But then there was me that went to Cambridge, and I was the first from my school to go, even though it had been a school since 1897. And certainly the first to be a choral scholar. That was something that they just didn't know what it was. And the other thing is that in Scotland, you have hires. Which are like the equivalent to AS in terms of like English level. But with 5 hires, you can get into a Scottish university. So my school's aim was to get people into Scottish universities. So, but if you want to study in England, you have to do advanced hires, which is just like A2 for English pupils. And they didn't usually run them like at all. And I was like, can I please do English, French, and Italian because I want to apply to Cambridge? And they were like, well, don't really know what we do about that, but let's investigate and see. And they could get funding from the government if there were 5 people, if there were 5 people per year who were interested in doing a subject. So that was certainly the case for French. So there were 5 of us who did French together. But then there was only 1 other person for Italian and English. So my school did this kind of half and half thing, which ended up with me just having 13 hours of contact time instead of 30. At which point my parents were like, well, if you're only going to be at school 13 hours a week, you can get a job to fund your life and to help you pay for your costs through uni, which is exactly what I did. I was working 30 hours a week in Waterstones instead, like all my weekends, and keeping on top of all the singing. So I was doing the junior academy at what's now the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. All day on a Saturday, I was singing in the cathedral choir, and on the Sunday, I mean, like as a kid, I think I was even busier than I am now, because like that last year before applying was the busiest of my life, and in the end, it all paid off. But I would not have been able to do it without the help of a couple of key, like teachers, maybe 3-4 teachers. And yeah, I kind of wish that I had known about or had something like Insight to help me along as we go, as I went along. So there's a couple of questions that have appeared already. Anything to know about applying to Scottish uni from England? Yes. Number one is that because of everything, of some of the things I've just explained, which is mainly that we don't do, in Scotland, we don't do the equivalent of A2 level. It means that the first year of most Scottish uni degrees is basically for the Scottish kids to catch up with the English kids. As in students, sorry, not kids, that's a terrible word to use. But basically a lot of my friends that I met, later when I went back to Glasgow, who were from England and had studied at Glasgow or had studied at Edinburgh or had studied at Dundee, said that their English A-levels had essentially over-prepared them for their time at uni, and that the first year was quite easy compared to what they were used to doing. But I will say that is only from a humanities perspective. I don't have that much to offer. I'll, put my hands up and say I don't have that much to offer in terms of studying sciences, because most of the people that I have spent my life and my time with are humanities students, musicians, etc. So my knowledge is very much about humanities-based and essay-based degrees. How much extra reading would you recommend doing for modern languages? As much as you can and as much as you want to. I would basically say that you should take huge advantage of your summer holidays, or in fact any of your holidays, to investigate anything that's related to your subject, in terms of extra reading or grammar that you find difficult or anything that's time consuming. I mean, watching films in a foreign language is a time consuming but incredibly worthwhile use of your time if you're thinking about studying languages in particular. And I would encourage any of you, whichever subjects you're applying for, to look on the university websites, where the universities that you're intending to apply to, and see if you can find their reading lists for their first year. Lots of them have it all like up, on the website, readily available. Have a little look through and start reading a couple of the texts that are already on the list. So you can go into your interview and be like, oh yes, and then when I read that really complicated text that is already on your first year syllabus, any extra reading that you can do is only going to make your life so much easier. And in terms of being honest in like answering their questions, like if you're really, really, really into something and you're really excited about something and interested in something, just read absolutely everything you can that's anything related to it. And not just reading, listening to all the podcasts that are available now. Like when I was at uni, podcasts were not a thing. 2008 to 2012, there's so much. Netflix wasn't a thing. I went through the whole of my university experience without Netflix. We had iPlayer and Channel 4 and that was it. Do you know what I mean? So you guys have got an insane amount of resources, particularly with modern languages, the Netflix, changing your settings, all of that, changing your language settings, the subtitles into all your different languages, all of that. Do as much of that as you want. Basically allow your inner nerd or geek or kino bino to like be its happiest self when you're doing all of these things, because that is 100% the kind of people that Oxbridge in particular really, really want. A couple more questions. What aspects of your chosen modern language did you look at for your personal statement? Let me see if I can remember. I was applying for 2 languages because at Cambridge at the time, that's what you had to do. So I definitely remember having to be keen about both of them. I was coming at it at a pretty specific angle in that I already knew, just, completely mad, but it's true. I already knew that I wanted to be an opera singer. So and most of them are written in Italian and French and based on big Italian and French texts, and German as well, obviously. And so I just talked about how much I loved it and all the things that I wanted to read. I'd already checked the reading lists, and there were particular modules that were really appealing to me. I discovered the Fellini films, so I really wanted to study Fellini. And actually the French, for me, it was all about films and poetry and anything related to opera. And I just referred to really specific, I think 2 key points for each of my language, and went into quite a lot of depth about why they were interesting to me, why they were important to me, and how they were related to the courses that were available at the university that I was applying for. What societies, clubs was I in? What wasn't I in? Especially at Cambridge, I think there is a reason that the terms are only 8 weeks long, because everyone was trying to pack in as much as they possibly could. So work hard and play hard was 100% my experience. And sleeping for 4 or 5 hours a night just to be able to do all of those things and get the most out of it, because I was in, obviously, the languages is quite heavy in terms of course material and what we had to get through and produce and write as well, and the quality that was expected of us obviously is incredibly high. That goes without saying. But everybody I ever engaged with at Cambridge was also really good at one other thing, or maybe 2 other things, some of which were incompatible. So for example, I sang in Trinity Choir, which was 1, 2, 3. We sang 4 days a week, but on Sunday we did 2 services. We had extra rehearsals on a Thursday night. That was doing a part-time job, basically, which meant that there were certain subjects where and I think that, I'm pretty sure this is still the case, there are certain subjects that if you choose to study that subject, there are certain college choirs that you then can't sing in because of the time constraints and the amount of commitment that you're expected to and that you kind of have to. But choir and then all of the other music, basically it's the only time in my life where I've been surrounded by free, amazing venues. And it's the only time in my life I've also been surprised by people who want to do all of the different things. So people were constantly putting on operas. I did a lot with the Cambridge University Opera Society, for example. And you're just surrounded by people who want to direct things, who want to produce things, who want to conduct things. They put them all on. And I'll tell you what, all of those people are now the basis of my professional network. Even here in Berlin, I've got 5 Cambridge pals who live with me in Berlin. And that was also great because that tied into my social life. So my social life was very much the people I was doing music with. So you do a concert, you rehearse, you do a concert, you prepare stuff together, then you go out afterwards. And the social life is also a really important part of the Cambridge experience. I think if you go to Cambridge and you're just locking yourself in your room to just do your subject, you're massively missing half the point of being there, because everyone that I know who went to Cambridge, regardless of what they studied, has the core of their professional network, whatever that may be, came from the people that they were at university with and the people that they socialized with. It's the same for politics. It's the same for the finance industry. It's the same for law. It's the same for performing arts, definitely. If you look at the number of successful British actors, musicians, singers, everything, a lot of them went through Oxford and Cambridge, and a lot of that was because of the time that they were investing in developing that network. Because a social life isn't just, especially like at Cambridge, a social life isn't just kind of people. I mean, it is definitely people that you have fun with and go out with and all of that, but you're actually laying the foundations for your social network for the rest of your life. Even though I moved here to Germany nearly 2 years ago under quite fraught circumstances. And the people that I have my Skype dates with and the people who were checking up on me are the people that I met at Cambridge. I mean, my core support network in my life were the people I was at Cambridge with. Because if you've been through that intense experience, and it is an intense experience, because of everything I've just said, you know, everyone wants to do the thing that they love. Everyone wants to study the thing that they love. And those may be very different things. Lots of the musicians and lots of the excellent musicians are also mathematicians, for example, or study natural sciences, you know, and it is intense, and the pressure is high and everything, but you also need your downtime because you're human beings, you know. But I would say that all of these things has meant that in my life, I am now the master of my own timetable. So it makes you really, really good at structuring the time that is available to you. So structuring the hours in the day that you have. And sometimes you have to make more hours in the day than are humanly possible to get through everything you need to get through. But that will prepare you for applying for any sort of high pressure job, any job actually. It will prepare you for being freelance. It will prepare you for juggling career and family pressures. It prepares you, the mentality of like, how can I get everything that is possible from life is very much present at a university like Cambridge. There are lots of other universities where it's similar that are not Cambridge and Oxford. And these are all skills that you're set up with for life. And that means that when you're applying for a job, even if it has nothing to do with your subject, people look at Cambridge and they go, aha, yes. So this person knows how to perform under pressure. This person knows how to produce excellent quality work. This person knows how to structure their own time. This person knows how to network and how to, get on with life. So there are lots of aspects that are equally important, I would say, to your university experience. So in answer to a question, do you feel that going to Cambridge didn't offer you a proper university experience? I would say no. I would say that it gave me the best university experience, but the most full-on university experience. Having said that, I don't know if this is still the case. I would expect it still is the case, but it was not possible, as in like you're actually not allowed to get any other form of employment during term time at Cambridge, which I found really difficult to deal with because I came from a much lower socioeconomic background to my peers. So, there were lots of lonely evenings in my room doing my work when I knew everyone else was out at Pizza Express, because I was like, nope, I cannot afford to eat out. That is ridiculous. But that was also a byproduct of the college that I was at, which still, sadly, is more than 50% from like really expensive private schools. I mean, it was a huge culture shock for me, I'm not going to lie. Like going from a Glasgow State school into a choir where all of the boys on the back row were from the same school. I was like, what is that? Like, you guys have known each other since you're like 7. Like, that's ridiculous. So yeah, but as with everything, the experience is what you make of it. So you can choose to just do your subject and nothing else, and and then spend the evening in the pub with your friend, or whatever. But it's definitely what you make of it, but the amount of choice that's available to you is just insane. So maybe having a clear idea of what your second bow to your studying would be before you go is a good idea, like me with my singing. Yes, I do have lots of music books ready to recommend. Regarding music opera, are there any arias in particular to look at in detail? I mean, I can't really answer that question. Sorry, this is Maria's question. I can't really answer that with knowing a bit more about you. And I am more than happy for you to contact Insight and ask for my email, and we can talk about that. That is 100% something that I am up for doing. Yes, I have always felt stressed before, when I was at school especially. I felt stressed and I felt the pressure of it, but I dealt with that by preparing. And that doesn't mean preparing well for an exam doesn't just mean spending every hour that God sends cramming all the information into your head. Preparing for exams, to do well for exams, your brain needs to work really well and really efficiently, which means you need to get enough sleep. I know it sounds basic, and I know your parents might have already told you all these things, but it's just true. Like your brain, that people have done studies on this, you know, in terms of studying science and how the brain absorbs information. You've got to get enough sleep. You've got to stay hydrated. I mean, I'm particularly sensitive to that because I'm a singer, so, you know, but it's true. You've got to get enough sleep. You've got to stay hydrated. You've got to find what it is that is your stress buster, right? So for some people, at my school, we had a boxing team, which I joined when I was doing my hires, and it was the best stress buster. Literally, take up boxing. Oh my God. Most efficient way of getting stuff out of your system. Yeah, if it's sport, if it's treating yourself by watching an episode of something, if it's phoning your pal you've not seen for ages, if it's having dinner with your family, identify what it is that makes you feel relaxed, and then factor in enough time for that into your study schedule. So your studying schedule should not just be like wall to wall, you know, like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. studying, because your brain is just not going to deal with that. Everyone has between 6 and 8 hours of good brain concentration in them. So just bear that in mind when you're planning your stuff. Sorry, more questions coming in. Did working a job along studying ever interfere with your education? I've got 3 jobs. And are there cases of people who have low expected grades getting in by outperforming by a long shot? Okay, I can actually answer these 2 questions at the same time. In that, yes, working alongside and studying when I was at school affected my education in the sense that I had to work out how to squeeze in everything in that I had to. And having just said the importance of getting sleep and the importance of looking after yourself, that is all from my experience of not having done those things. So I did not do any of those things. And I then had a weekend where I was ill and had to take time off work. And I was like, no, I need to readdress my life. I need to reassess my priorities. And then I did get enough sleep, and then I did find enough time to do everything. And then it was okay in the end. However, because my school could only afford to provide less than the contact time, like less than the standard contact time, that really affected my my grades, actually. So this is something that some people don't know, but like in general, well, I'm only talking from my own experience and from Cambridge anyway. This is something that they actually do if you're from a school that they've never heard of before. Okay, so I was applying to Cambridge at a time, well, to university, applied to lots of other places as well, obviously, at a time where A stars didn't exist, right? So it was just A, B, C, D, E, that was it, right? Or F, if you failed, obviously. My offer for Trinity, so this is the other thing about Cambridge in particular and Oxford, is that the colleges can change and choose their offers. So the standard Cambridge-wide university offer for advanced hires was AAB at the time. But Trinity wanted AAA because Trinity at the time, and like during my entire degree, provided like nearly half of the people who got firsts. So it was a super academic college. So they wanted 3 A's from people. So I did my Italian, French, and English. And in Scotland, we get our results 10 days before the English students do. And I got mine by text. I was like, great. I was at my friend's house. We just had a massive party to celebrate not having to do anything ever again. It was a kind of like, last big weekend before we all went off to do our different things. And I woke up to this text saying that I'd got an AAB, right? So I'd got A's for my languages and a B for English, which I was just like, what is this? This guy was like, it's all over. It's all done. My life is over. Everything that I've been trying, everything I've been working up to, everything has just gone, and actually I phoned, and again, be proactive. Guys, phone people. Emails are slow. If you have information that you need, phone people. If there's an available phone number for a admissions person at the college you've applied for and something doesn't work with your application, phone them and you will probably talk to someone who's super supportive and helpful like I did. I phoned up being like, yeah, so I missed my offer. What are my options? What are my options? And they said, well, you've got to wait until the English people get the results, and then we've got to wait to see if there's still a place for you, right? So that was the longest 10 days of my life and probably of my family's life, waiting to hear what was going to happen. And as it was, I was in Cambridge on the English results day, singing. What was it I was singing? I was singing in a concert in St. John's College Chapel in a choir that was already like professional. Like I was already working as a singer and stuff. And I was surrounded by all of these guys from like Eton and Harrow who were all like, oh, amazing. Yeah, darling. Yeah. I got 3 A's, like totally nailed it. Yeah, 3 A's, like 4 A's. No, I got 4 A's because I did an extra one, and I was like, I still don't know what's happening with my life. What am I going to do? And decided, okay, like it's 12:30 and I've not heard anything. I'm just going to have a shower and sort my life out, and afterwards and just like forget about it for half an hour. And of course, Trinity phoned while I was in the shower. So I then had to get out of the shower and was standing there in a towel listening to this woman being like, yeah, so actually we've investigated your school and we found out a lot about you. And under the circumstances, the fact that you got 2 A's and a B with juggling the things you were juggling and from a school that was only giving you 13 hours a week of support is way more impressive than all these people who are like trained from birth to get 4 A's and go to Cambridge, So I got in and it was all fine. And it was all totally worth it. But even just to answer some of these more questions, I hope that all of this is helpful. I feel a little bit like I'm just like, guys, this is my experience. But let's see if I can answer some more questions. There are more questions. How was the admission and interview process? So for me, it was a little bit different, especially in terms of the choral scholarship, because it was the other way around when I was applying. So now, for any of you who are interested in applying for choral scholarships, and also the instrumental award scheme. This is something that people don't know about, but if you're really, really good at playing a classical instrument, there is money available for you that can add up to like £1,000 a year to help towards living costs, and help you get like paid work and stuff. So that's if any of you who are remotely musically inclined in any direction and are good at it, then investigate that, because it's a thing that lots of people are not aware of, especially from state schools. So in my experience, my admission and interview process was, from my perspective, challenging and a walking disaster. But as I said, it all ended up okay. In that, obviously, my school had never sent anyone before, and they just didn't know what they were doing. They were really, really supportive and wanted to do everything that they could, but they just didn't really have the wherewithal in order to do that, you know. So back in the day, if you wanted to apply for a choral scholarship, you had to apply about 6 weeks. Yeah, it was like a month or 6 weeks before everybody else. So we're talking like middle of September or something, and then the applications for the academic admissions were in October. And I handed in, there was a Cambridge Choral Scholarship application form to hand in, and I handed that in, sent that off, felt really pleased with myself. I got my references, everything was great. Then the woman phones me from Trinity on a Wednesday night being like, "Hi, Margaret. So we've got your choral scholarship application form, but where's everything else?" And I was like, "What do you mean, where's everything else?" And she was like, "Well, all your other UCAS choices, your UCAS personal statement, your Cambridge application form, your Cambridge personal statement, like literally all of the stuff that you guys are probably already drafting now." And I was like, "I don't have any of that. What do I do?" She was like, "Well, your surname begins with W. So realistically, I'm not going to get to it until Friday lunchtime, more or less. So if you can make sure that it's on my desk in Cambridge by Friday lunchtime, then it'll all be okay." And I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And luckily, I had the phone number of a couple of my teachers. One especially, we had these like guidance teachers, and we had their phone numbers. And I phoned her immediately and explained what just happened. She was like, "Right, Margaret, I'm cancelling all my lessons tomorrow. You're coming in at 7:30. We're going to get the whole thing done." So that's what we did. And then my school paid for a courier to take it down to Cambridge, which was awesome. But like, man, the pressure was on, you know, from then, like, because they were so invested in me. I was then like, okay, I've got to be really good. I've got to be really good. I've got to be really good. And I felt like I was doing everything that I could, you know. I was like speaking Italian with my Italian pals the whole time. I was spending I didn't really have any spare time, but it was a case of like, I slept between 12 and 6 and then did some work before I went to school, and then went to school, and then would do my Waterstones shift and probably do some practice in my break, like singing practice in my break or whatever, and then go home and then like do it all again the next day. So like cramming all of these things is possible, but it's obviously not ideal, but you've got to do what you've got to do. Like in life, if you have stuff you need to pay for, you just need to have a way of like earning money somehow. And basically when I then felt like pretty prepared for my interviews, I think possibly like ignorance is bliss was kind of a bit of a theme, and that I just went in there being super keen and sparky and nerdy about like all the things that we talked about. So I had 2 interviews. One was for Italian, obviously, and one was for French. And I had my Italian one in the morning, and then I had my French one in the afternoon. And my Italian one was great and was actually done by the guy who ended up supervising me for my dissertation, for my Dante and Blake dissertation. And we had to read in each of the interviews, this was very much the case. We had to get there half an hour before. We were given a poem in the language, and then we were expected to have whatever thoughts that occurred to us, like analyze it, come up with everything, try to link in other stuff that we'd done from our secondary reading, all this kind of thing. And then also be expected to discuss it in the language in which it was written. So I had a Petrarch sonnet, so Petrarca for my Italian one, which was all kind of like seeing without eyes and flying without wings and all that kind of thing. And that then led to a discussion about an Italian film that I'd recently seen and loved, Cinema Paradiso, because there's a guy who's lost his sight, and he says, like, now that I'm blind, I can see more clearly. It's about bringing in other things that you've absorbed from other reading and other viewing and life experience as well, like into your interview. And I left that. I mean, lots of other things happened, obviously, but this was like 12 years ago. No, oh my God, yeah, longer. But then I went to my French one, and I felt like really quite confident after and oblivious, obviously. Also, guys, in Scotland, we leave school when we're 17. So bear in mind, I had literally the month before turned 17 when I was doing all of this, which now that I tutor people who are 16, 17 is just mad, but that's how it was. And I went like bouncing along to my French one, and felt like everything was great. And then basically, to cut a long story short, it was terrifying. Again, it's about personality. So one-on-one, sometimes there are just some people who are like, no, you're not for me. And some people are like, yes, you're awesome. Hopefully you guys get the one who's like, yes, this person is great, and I need to teach her for the next 4 years, But my French one, I will always remember the date of Algerian independence, because the poem was written by an Algerian poet, and I didn't know that at the time. And he then asked me when Algeria gained its independence, and I was like, ooh, my brain went into this whole like, I don't know that question. I don't know the answer to that question. Red herring is probably much later than you'd expect. So I said and I was honest, because I can't not be honest. I was like, 1978. And he went, no, 1962. You can leave now. That was it. And I was like, oh my God, boom, stomach hit the floor, all of that. It was intense, but you can't read anything into what these people are doing. These people basically are just trying to work out how you think. And sometimes that comes across as encouraging, and sometimes that comes across as the opposite of encouraging. And that's their stuff. You focus on your stuff, ignore whatever stuff they're doing, develop your bubble of I love my subject and everything's great, that will help you a lot. Okay, more questions. What were your predicted grades and how did they compare with entry requirements? My predicted grades and entry requirements were actually the same. I don't know if that's a general one, but that's all I can offer from my experience. Do all Cambridge courses offer a year abroad? No, the year abroad is specific to people studying languages. I mean, there is if you study vet medicine or if you study medicine, there is an option to spend a year studying something else, which is basically at the stage when the degree is getting quite hardcore in terms of actually being vocational and directly applicable to future employment. And they essentially give you a year in which to try something else out to make sure you're double, triple, quadruple sure that you want to be a medic or a vet. There was a girl in my year, in first year, for example, who was, I think, third year vet student. And she'd lived in Italy as a kid. And when they were like, oh, is there anything else you want to study for a year? She was like, yes, I'll revise my Italian. Thank you very much. But otherwise, the year abroad is for linguists, so anyone studying languages. And the entire purpose of that year abroad is to get you completely immersed in the language and develop your spoken, your spoken Italian, German, French, Spanish, whatever, and actually, that's when the social life serves an active purpose, because when you are studying languages, the whole point of learning another language is to be able to talk to other people and to be able to communicate with people. So making friends on your year abroad in a foreign language is actually part of your work if you do that, which is awesome. For me, that was awesome. I went to an Italian conservatoire and studied singing for the year. So I got to continue to develop that as well and study all the Italian stuff in Italian, which was awesome. But you do have your year abroad project to think about as well, which is your chance to write everything that you've ever thought about something to do with your chosen language or translation project. Or other questions, tips for revision in general, or how do you prepare for your final exams? Tips for revision in general, I think it's really important to work out what kind of learner you are, and then do whatever fits that. So when you're trying to remember information, do you remember what it looks like? So what the page of the textbook looks like, if you're trying to remember a grid or whatever. Do you remember what it sounds like? So do you remember what was being actively said to you at the time? Do you remember stuff more clearly if you've heard it rather than seen it written down? Or do you remember what you were doing when you learned that piece of information? Most people are a mix of two. I would definitely encourage each of you to spend a bit of time thinking about that. And all you need to do is be okay, I'm trying to remember the thing we did in English yesterday, and then try to remember it. And if you can see an image in your head of the book, then you're probably a visual learner. If you remember the sound of your teacher's voice, then you're probably an auditory learner. If you remember what you were doing at the time, like if it was an active thing or if you were just writing or whatever, then you're probably what's called a kinesthetic learner. And identifying this then helps you revise in a way that is actively helpful for you. So if you're a visual learner, it's all about color coding your revision stuff and drawing things and doing making flashcards to test yourself and all that kind of thing. Flashcards are also helpful if you're kinesthetic, because you're actively doing it. If you're also one of those learners, prescribing actions to bits of text, even if it feels a bit ridiculous, doesn't matter. You're at home, at your desk, doing your studying. No one cares. Do what you need to do to help you. Yeah. If you're an auditory learner, you can use voice notes or a dictaphone or a dictaphone. Nobody has dictaphones anymore. Oh my God. But some kind of voice recording app to, for example, if you're learning vocabulary, to read out the vocabulary list that you need to learn, and then listen to it while you're exercising or while you're walking to school or while you're cooking or while you're doing other things. Help yourselves in that way, but you need to know what your thing is first. I'm pretty sure there are lots of internet-based kind of what kind of learner am I quiz sort of things, which will help you. More questions. Do you think shorter term times affect your learning experience with the shorter time with direct contact in Cambridge? So I think what that question means is the fact that we only had 8 weeks at a time. Did that have an overall impact on my learning experience? And the shorter time with direct contact with Cambridge, I mean, yes, it's a shorter time in terms of weeks, but we got so much contact time, as in one-on-one time with our tutors, with our supervisors, everything. So the actual level of contact time, by which I mean time spent in a lecture, in a supervision, in a seminar at Cambridge is actually really high, which is one of the good things about it. Because like, I mean, not to be brutal about it, but like you kind of feel like you're getting your money's worth if you feel well supported and you have a lot of contact time, you know, because like it's not a student loans and everything, like that's a whole separate topic. But the shorter time definitely affected my learning experience in that it made it kind of sharp and short and intense. As in my final year, I also borrowed the tragedy paper from the English tripos, because they cancelled the Italian cinema paper in that year, and I didn't want to do the Dante exam because I knew that I wouldn't like enjoy it. Like that would just like cause me too much stress, and I'd already set my heart on my dissertation. So they were like, "Oh well, you can choose to do another paper from another subject," which is another thing that people don't realize you can do. Like just setting yourself, like just doing history or just doing theology or just doing like your subject doesn't actually exclude you from investigating other interests academically, especially in your final year. Within the humanities, there's a lot of overlap and you are allowed to borrow papers, which is one of the reasons it's great. So I was then a keen bean, finally getting to write about Shakespeare and Greek stuff and opera because it's all connected, because it's all stagecraft, it's all stage stuff, you know. But that then massively increased my amount of writing that I had to do in a week. So there were times during my final year where each week I was being expected to produce in total, because of the word limits and everything for the essays, like about 10,000 words a week, which sounds terrifying, but it makes you really good at just like sitting down, doing your stuff, bashing it out, having all your thoughts like super quickly. But yeah, I mean, that's not necessarily an enjoyable way of doing it. You know, a little bit of a longer time would maybe be beneficial to some people, but actually I think one of the skills that you learn that's like an actual transferable life skill is being expected to produce a lot in a short space of time. And I think you would lose that if you extended the times. And it also meant that for lots of us, well, I say lots of us, actually, like literally 3 people that I knew who had holiday jobs in between, it gave us the chance to go home and earn some money in the holidays as well. So I was doing a combination of, I was good pals with my manager in Waterstone. So basically every time I was in Glasgow, I was like, do you need any shifts covering for the next month? And then she would just give me like stuff, and then I'd be reading ahead. Use your holidays, always use your holidays for reading and having your thoughts. So look ahead, like a term ahead, even now, even in your exam subjects, like even for AS, A-level, GCSE even, you know, look ahead to what is coming after the holiday that you're currently in, if you're in one, and read ahead, because it will just give your brain so much time when you're in it. Like when you're in the midst of it all and you're having to produce stuff. So get the really lengthy, time-consuming texts that require a lot of thought read before you go, like before you start. So you can enjoy taking the time to like have your ideas, rather than be like, I've got to have ideas about this by like Tuesday and it's Friday and I've got like 8 hours of singing to do at the weekend, you know? Help yourself by reading ahead, like regardless of what level you're at. Just like, honestly, there is no such thing as kind of over preparation. And around what month did you probably start revising before A-level exam? Well, I knew that I wouldn't have time to do it like that. I mean, so I worked really consistently hard all year. so that when I got to exam time from the Easter holidays, from like the start of the Easter holidays, it was like, this is revision rather than cramming stuff that I kind of didn't pay attention to 3 months before. Because I was already busy, I kind of didn't have the luxury of like waiting till Easter to think about revising for my exams. I knew I had to be ahead of the game in that sense. And I would actually offer that as a general piece of advice to anyone at any stage of education, is to always do a little bit more than you think that you do, in order to take the pressure off and reduce the stress, like the closer you get to the thing. You can't start too early, basically. But it, I mean, you know, that doesn't need to add like 2 hours a day to your schedule. It can literally add like 15 minutes. But, you know, 15 minutes every night, 5 nights a week adds up to quite a lot of time over time, you know. How do you think? Oh, yes. How do you think the high volume of essays affected the quality of your writing? Actually, it helped the quality of my writing, because we were marked on style as well. Like style was really important to my degree. So it was basically like lots of practice at expressing myself, really. Lots of practice at writing, because you find out when you have to do like that high level of output, you work out for yourself what your quickest and best formulae are for completing a well thought out, well structured essay. And I actually was already using lots of the structures that Insight offer, like or encourage, like the disc and the Peril, especially like having the structure. I had like a super ingrained sense of like how to structure an essay, and then it was a case of having ideas, doing my reading, making huge extensive notes while doing my reading. If you make loads of notes and get all your ideas down while you're reading, you've basically written your essay for yourself, and all you have to do is match it up with the structure. And like, if it's not already kind of academically phrased enough, then you just kind of rewrite it in that sense. So it becomes more like an editing job rather than actually like having to sit down and be like, this is the best essay I'm ever going to produce. That's also another thing, is that when you're being expected to produce that volume, you just have to trust yourself that what you're producing is good enough, because you're there, you're studying at that university, they want you for a reason. You are capable, you are good enough. So you just have to sit down and get through it however you can. And, you know, and again, that leaves you more than able to cope with a heavier workload, like in lots of different realms, like in later life, you know. What would you do over the summer to prepare for Oxbridge? I would check the reading lists of your proposed subject or subjects, actually, and I would read some of the core texts from that. And if you're applying for languages, you don't necessarily in the first reading, especially in like pre-interview reading, need to read it in the second language. Penguin Classics translation is completely fine. Having ideas about the content is the most important thing to begin with, like as a way in, you know. So I would, in terms of preparation for Oxbridge over the summer, I would investigate what it is you need to do. If you're about to start your course, have a look at your first term's worth of stuff. If they've already sent you things, if they haven't, you can access most things on the site, on the relevant subject websites, and do your own investigation. Or if you've got a friend who's the year above you, ask them. Asking people you know who have done stuff, or know people who know. Like, honestly, you'd be amazed at what can happen when a friend of a friend of a friend asks for help for somebody of the benefit of a friend of a friend of a friend, you know. Like, never ever be afraid to ask for help, ask for extra support, ask questions, just ask. Like, if you don't ask, then you don't find out the answer, but if you do ask, then like you might suddenly discover that you're going to study a new subject. This is something that I briefly want to say. I've only got 5 minutes left. But this is something else that I want to say, is that a lot of people don't know this from state schools, obviously, but there are lots of subjects available at Cambridge and Oxford that seem a bit rogue and seem a bit niche. And therefore, they have really low application statistics. So if your aim is to have the Oxbridge experience and have that on your CV, and you have wider interests, then have a little look at them. You do have to, this was actually given to me as advice, you have to ask yourself what the most important thing is for you. So is the most important thing studying at the university for which is the best one in the country for that subject? That might not actually be Oxford or Cambridge. Have a little look at league tables and do some research. So ask yourself, is the best university for my subject the most important thing? Or is getting into Oxford and Cambridge the most important thing? If the latter is true, look at the slightly niche subjects that are somehow related to what it is you're applying for. For example, Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic, archaeology and anthropology, although I think it's called HPS now, and theology is massively undersubscribed, but it's basically philosophy and history and political theory in another guise. Ditto with the ASMEC, the Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic. That's still languages. You're still learning the critical thinking skills that you would learn through doing a language, through being at Oxford or Cambridge, but through a niche subject. I would certainly recommend that if you are a Lord of the Rings fan in any way, or like science fiction based in any way, because lots of the things that lots of the cult texts are based on come from those languages. So that's something to feed another interest. And you might think, okay, well, looking at these subjects, what the hell job is that going to get me when I leave? Anything, actually, especially with Oxford and Cambridge. What you study, as in the subject that you choose, in a way is kind of irrelevant, because for most employers, it's enough that you were at that university. And there are so many different ways of converting to something afterwards. And often it helps, one of my friend's dads is QC and he studied English. Just thinking off the top of my head, one of my good friends who was a singer but studied law is now on the West End as a singer, really successfully. He's in Hamilton. He originally studied law. Another friend who studied classics is now a doctor. He converted and studied medicine. So the subjects that you choose when you go is not you writing the rest of your life in marble, like in stone, So my advice is always to go and study something that you would be happy to write many, many, many words about and talk endlessly about, endlessly and enthusiastically about. I think, or I hope I've answered all the questions. I kind of feel like I've just ranted at you all for nearly 58 minutes. And it feels really, really odd to just be like, hey, this is my life and I hope that the information from it is helpful. But I really, really honestly do. I might talk to some of you again at a future session. I don't know. I do know that there is another one of these sessions on the 22nd of June, which is a lot more UCAS specific. I do know that. I wish you all the best of luck. I hope that was helpful. And have a lovely evening. Okay, bye.